cost.
That is correct.
Which just went down as well. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, I'm just glad that we can do this. I know in November it looked very bleak, and I spent a lot of time crunching numbers and found out all about debt service and 10% of your gross, and anyway, and then now all the numbers changed and everything's working out, and we really, this is just such good news that we can do this, the water and sewer line. I know the EDC has been pushing this project for years, and well, so is the city. Anyway, I'm just so pleased that the numbers are going to work for us. So I'm very much for this.
Ed?
Yes, thanks. Debt service was a major consideration, as it is in any financial decisions, especially this size. Let me ask you this: relieving or retiring the 2002 and 2007 CFOs will, in your estimation, relieve us how much per year of debt service between this EDC and the city?
The 2002 is about 134,000, as I recall. The 2007, those won't be paid off until 2027. It's the 2002
So
that'll come up in 2017.
And that represents how much a year?
About 135,000 is what we paid this last time, as I recall. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Close enough, yes.
No, that's great. I mean, I was crunching numbers too, you know, option one, option two is presented in these tables, and, you know, I kept coming up with, okay, we've got approximately $237,000 per year tax debt service, you know, between the two options. But when we have, when we're retiring some debt, as we are in this case, very quickly, it makes it more palatable. I was concerned overall, the debt service between the city and the EDC, but
Yeah, and again,
with
if
this
you,
structuring, it's awesome.
yeah, and again, the only way that works, I know that council had some concerns about going out along 20 years, but that's the only way that this actually can work to where our debt service remains stable over the course through 2035, essentially. So,
And the other part was the interest rates that are shown here in these tables at the different levels, or amortization, you know, 10, 15, 20 years. I was pleasantly surprised to see that interest rate not jump up or spike up, you know, going to a 20-year term. That's all. Thank you.
Susan, any comments from you?
Only that Ann has been a fabulous partner with us on this to figure out exactly how to do this without any long-term negative impact to the city, without having to sell it with a usury rate because they have to wait so long for their money. But in my mind, with the time value of money, we're really even better off because we're going to be sitting on our own cash longer. And my only question was gonna be if Ann still thought this was gonna be able to have a private placement with this restructure.
And if you would, come on up and address whatever issues you feel like you'd like to address.
Yes, sir.
I would like to say also that since we first brought this to council and we were very pessimistic at the time, we did try and make it very clear that we certainly weren't saying we would never do the project. We were just looking to get to a point where we are now. Since we were early into the plans, we felt like as plans would go along, and we're now at the 95% phase, getting ready to submit them to SAWS and TxDOT, that estimate for the project has been coming down steadily. We feel we're pretty close now, and we do include the 10% contingencies in the bid. The other projects are very viable, and we've pretty well tied those numbers down. So the things that we said before was that give us time. The time is now, and we do feel with this structuring that we have been able to come up with now that it's a viable project. So Ann, take it away.
Yes, sir. Honorable Mayor and Council, it's a pleasure to be back before you again this evening. Before I go, Mayor, if I can, I'd just like to introduce Jorge Delgado.
Sure.
He is my colleague and team member working with me with the City of Helotes, and I just wanted to introduce you to him and acknowledge all his help and assistance in what we've done. Ms. Wooten, back to your question. Interestingly, right now, we are seeing more supply in the market. except on the bank qualified, and that's for bond issues that are $10 million or less in a calendar year. And right now there is a significant appetite for bank qualified bond issues. So based on that, I think we would recommend that we either pursue a competitive sale or a negotiated sale, just because we think that that would give a lower interest rate. Plus, the other thing is that we're finding is banks now, with a lot of the new regulations that are coming down through Dodd-Frank and a lot of the liquidity requirements that they have, banks are becoming a little bit more reluctant to go out to 20 years. And since I think that's one of the key factors, is Mr. Schroeder talked about the lowering of the cost, the $150,000 a year for the first 3 years, looking at doing an optimized wrapped around structure, and then the current interest rate environment, all those things have converged to be able to provide a debt service schedule that is able to keep your tax rate level. But again, a key part of that is the 20 years, and we may get some pushbacks from banks, and on the other side, we're just seeing bank qualified paper very, very in high demand at this point in time.
I would like to say that when we did our dispatch center, I sat through many meetings with IT guys and radio guys, and so much of that just blew right past me. A close second to that is in listening to Ann and her staff go through the financial part of how all of this is going to be structured and how it works. But through repeated questions, she and her staff have done a great job of putting this package together and making it hopefully understandable, I know for me, up to a point, and now council. But I will, if you would, we'll see if council has any questions for you.
Yes.
And Bert, we'll start off with you. You have any questions for Ann?
Yes, Ann, assuming the council approves this evening, when would you go out for the C of O? What would be the optimum time to do that?
Yes, sir. We are prepared that we could be back at the meeting on the 28th, and the first step in a certificate of obligation is called a notice of intent, and that's where the council would take the first formal action to publicly authorize the certificate of obligation process. The state law requires for certificates of obligation that there are 2 publications once a week for 2 weeks, 2 consecutive weeks, in the newspaper of general circulation. The other requirement that they have is that the first publication, and when you actually issue the bonds, you cannot have less than 30 days between. So what we would envision is that we would be back for your meeting July 23rd and have a bid at that point in time for the council's consideration. And if we do that, if we're back here on July 23rd, we would expect that you would be able to have your funds about August 20th.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to have Rick give some direction, but that's a great timeline. I have a couple of questions, but I'd like for council to have the chance. Cynthia, any questions from you?
No.
Alex?
No, sir. But by the way, I would just mention that you have your timeline is right exactly. Your memorization of dates follows exactly what the paper says. Thank you.
Ed?
Just one last question. So the interest rate is still possibly negotiable?
Yes, sir. What I'd like to do is I know you've seen a lot of this before, but this is the, let me start with this one. This is the bond buyer index of 20 municipal bonds, and we look at this all the time. This is just such an important index in our markets. And this particular chart goes all the way back to 1981, and you can see overall we've had a very downward trend in interest rates over time, and our current interest rate is only 47 basis points higher than what is the low that goes back to 2012, but really the low that goes back to 1964. So you're less than 1/2 of 1% off of what is, 50-year low. What I would also like to point out, though, is that we've had some volatility in the market recently. And so this is the same chart, but it just goes from 2009 to 2015. And you can see on the right-hand side, we've started to see interest rates tick up a little bit. One of the things that we endeavored to do was to try to be conservative in the numbers that we have prepared, and we took what the prevailing rates were at the time of the analysis, and we added 35 basis points to them. our hope is that between now and when you would move forward, if the council makes the determination to do that, that interest rates won't go up over that 35 basis points, and it may be better than what we've shown. But given the recent upward trend, we felt like it was important and appropriate for us to put a cushion in there. We can't say what it will be by the time you access the market, but given the timing that you might potentially be looking at and the 35 basis points, our hope would be that we would be able to at least achieve, or if not exceed, what we have presented.
Timing is everything, obviously. The other thing is with our strong municipal bond rating that we work pretty hard to achieve, you know, through budgeting and budget cycles for many years. I think we're probably in the best position we can ever be in.
Oh, yes, sir. When
You know, negotiate the rate if need be.
well, and that's another reason too, I think, to consider an open market sale. Is I'm not sure local banks are going to give you the full credit for the strong financial credits that you have. If you'll recall, in 2013, you were upgraded from an A+ to a AA. That's a very, very significant accomplishment and a significant impact from a credit perspective. And on this particular chart, we put this in here because what this shows are credit spreads between, the green line shows the difference between a AAA and a AA, which is your rating. The red line shows the difference between a AAA and a single A, and then the blue line looks at the difference between a AAA and a BAA. And if you look, while there has been some volatility in the single A and the BAA category, it has been very consistent about the credit spreads between a AA and a AAA. And what is actually interesting is we had a bond sale 2 weeks ago for one of our clients who is a natural AAA, and their spreads went up higher than normal. And the feedback that we were getting from investors is, I'd rather have a couple of extra basis points in yield and have a AA rated credit than a AAA rated credit, because we know that they're not going to default. It's still a very strong credit, and that little bit of difference in the yield made a big difference. So I think it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that we have going on in our market right now.
Thanks. Just if you could explain for the folks in the room what a basis point is, since you mentioned that several times.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. 1 basis point is 0.01%. So there are 100 basis points in 1%.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, Bert? Thank you. Anything? Alex? Ed? I would like to just cover one thing. When we were talking earlier, and Rick and I were talking about this today, you had brought up how important it is to either do something before the 1st of September or after the 1st of January. With what we're doing now, is that still a critical time frame to where we either need to accomplish this before the 1st of September, and if not, wait till after the 1st of January?
It's very strange in the municipal markets. If you do a certificate of obligation and you issue that in December, and let's just say we'll use this year as an example, and you have it dated in December of 2015, but you can't go through the whole process of levying the tax until you get to 17. Investors have the difference between 15 and 16 psychologically. There's a penalty for it. It's a 5 or 10 basis point penalty, but that adds up. Whereas if you were to do that in January and you still have the next year difference and it's only a 3-week difference, there's no penalty. So what we like to do is we like to guide our clients that if they can try to avoid that September, October timeframe to December timeframe, we feel like you get a little bit of an advantage on your pricing. And so we just are always trying to be mindful and cognizant of that for the benefit of our clients. Now, sometimes clients have projects that timing just will not work with, but if you have some ability to work within that schedule, we think we would recommend doing that because it would help you to get a lower interest rate. The other thing too, just to come back to, the further out you go at this point in time, the more interest rate risk you will undertake as well.
Okay, and just as a reminder to council, if we do this, notice of intent on the 28th and have the funding the end of August, it's gonna be a little premature for the majority of that C of O, which is water and sewer, because that's probably gonna go toward the end of this year for approval, or into next year before we get it back from SAWS and the TxDOT. However, what it's gonna allow us to do is go ahead and proceed with the linear park project in Old Town, and also the $300,000 payment that we have on the bridge for 1560 is a commitment that we made to TxDOT to get that project started. And so that's why we're going to be looking at the notice of intent to start the clock next meeting and have it funded sometime end of August. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Is what we're doing? And that being said, we appreciate it.
Great, well, thank you. We
Okay.
appreciate being here and helping you on this.
Okay, and Rick, if you would, please, just summarize, I think, what I just said, so that we can get a direction from council rather than an action, so that they will, understand that what we're gonna try and accomplish next meeting on the 28th is to actually start the clock on the issuance of this C of O, on that night, and then have it funded August 20th. Or do y'all need a further explanation? So basically what we're looking at is consensus from you guys to go ahead and shoot for the, having everything ready for you guys to take action on the issuance of that notice of intent on the 28th. Fair enough?
For the 4.4 million,
For the 4.4 million,
for the 20 years, the structured payment, all of those things that we talked
everything
about.
we talked about.
Okay. And it's for those 4 projects.
Yes. So everything we talked about, that's what we're gonna be looking at. Okay, then there's no action required on this. Great discussion, and again, we thank you. Rick, your explanation was good. One last chance for any questions. Bert, anything?
Well, it's actually 5 things, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yes,
For capital improvements also?
It is
If
5.
as needed?
Yeah.
It's 5 things, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I was waiting for you to catch that. Alex?
No, thanks.
Ed? Cynthia, anything else? Okay, that finishes up our agenda. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and the action that we had tonight. If there are no objections from council, our agenda is complete. We will adjourn the meeting. No objections? We are adjourned, and the time is 8:44. That's for his scrapbook. That's for his scrapbook. Rick.